Good morning, comrades. Welcome back to the channel, welcome back to Apex, and welcome back to the second video where we talk about the Koenigsegg Agera RS top speed record driven by Niklas. We already did a first video introductory, which was a pretty long one, close to an hour or over an hour long. So make sure to check it up here in case you missed the video. Where we talk about how the idea came up, what car was used, why it was used, which concerns were there, and eventually arriving to the actual point towards the 4th of November 2017 to actually do the record. But a quick recap, the car was a customer car, which was a production spec car. You had the option, because sometimes when you see cars doing speed records, they take off mirrors, put smaller wings, take off all the seams. But you decided against it because it was very important, so it would be a production spec car.
Yeah, and it was an owner's car, and it was not a factory prepped car or anything like that. So it was a car coming from the production line with some kind of modification for the safety, my roll cage and so on.
Which were actually, again, not beneficial, but even worse. It would make the performance worse because they were adding weight, etc. So for the top speed purposes, it was not better.
No.
When we speak of the car, which is, again, it's a hypercar, it's produced in relatively small numbers. What kind of homologation does it involve? Is the car does it still meet some regulations?
Yeah, I mean, it's very important to point out that you should compare apples to apples and not apples to pears.
Yes.
In the end of the day, there is different categories in everything.
Absolutely.
And I mean, what we...
The fastest production lap record on the Nürburgring or street legal car, absolutely. And in this case, you wanted to have the fastest production car.
Yeah, otherwise you can take a drag racing car and just
do it.
Make a record. It's not a problem.
Or turn up the boost on your car and just go for it.
Yeah, but I mean, if we start talking numbers and so on about everything, it's just in context of being a fully homologated car is a huge task. And I mean, Koenigsegg at the end of the day is more or less putting 80% of all the development and all the things into the homologation process. And because it's such a huge thing. And the Agera RS is the first car that is homologated worldwide and is
from the Koenigsegg
family. And by meaning that, you can drive the car in California, which is the more or less the toughest emission related place on earth.
Yes. So the car was street legal pretty much everywhere in the world, and it's not just like, okay, hypercar, low production number, show and display, you can do whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
it meets all the mandatory standards to be street legal.
With airbags and all the smart airbags that is needed, and it's with all the regulations that is in the US, for example, and so on and so on. It's a huge thing.
I know. I mean, I worked at Rimac, and I know what, especially
ridiculous.
for US, you need to crash test so many cars. It's ridiculous, and like you said, 80% of the development costs go only towards the homologation of it. So again, very important to mention production car, but also production car in full homologated spec.
Street drivable legal car.
According to the highest authority. So let's not stick too much onto that regarding that topic. So it was a street legal car. What makes a record a record?
Yeah, that's a good question actually, and I it's being debated a lot. But for me, there is some regulations that comes from FIA, the motorsport organization, and they have this regulation saying that you need to drive in both directions. And
why is that?
Because it eliminates all kind of external elements like wind, like inclination of the road, and so on and so on. And you need to have a point where you're going in both directions. So you need to have a starting point and a finish point at the same position, and a starting point and a finish point going in both directions. And that is something very important, because then you cannot cheat in any kind of way because it is those points that is mandatory to hit these speeds. You have the in speed and out speed and the speed between,
and then you have the time average
and the time, and that's it. If it is 1 mile or 1 kilometer, there is the distance and you have the time, and then they have the average.
And so, how does it work towards the top speed record? Is it the same?
No.
So
no, a top speed record is more or less the fastest you can drive on the road. But
for to be the fastest car,
sorry, exactly. Yeah. And that is you take the highest number on both directions at a certain point, more or less.
So you do take the median also of the stretch.
Yeah. So normally that happens within these flying mile or flying kilometers, because then is where you reach the highest speed, and it's a very important thing also to maintain this high speed. I mean, during my first run and so on, maybe we should go into that later. But but nevertheless,
for part 3 of the video.
But it's very important that you maintain speed, just not to go up and then abruptly go down, because it's not showcasing everything.
So in this case, it's regulated by FIA. There's also obviously, for everyone who's more into general stuff, there's Guinness World Book of Records. Do they say anything about it? I
actually don't know about their kind of regulations that they have, but in the end of the day they are just a book. But I think they are more or less going off the regulations that the organizations have within that specified genre that you are doing. So I think they are meeting more or less what FIA have, that you need to do in both directions and so on. And they need to be presented there to be able to have their own measurement equipment and so on to be,
Now that's a very important next topic, is what measurement equipment is being used and which authorities need to be present there. So what was it in your case, or what is mandated, what is mandatory to have?
As mentioned, the FIA, we were actually hoping that FIA could be able to witness this, but FIA have a long process time of all this, and said in the first video that we only had like 1.5 months to prepare everything, and that was not enough time for FIA to be able to attend it in person. So we needed to think another way, and the organization, which is the customer at the end of the day, he brought in Race Logic to be present. They come with their own equipment to be able to measure. They put in the equipment in the car by themselves, so no questions raised.
What does the equipment consist of?
It's 2 GPS sensors and a microphone and their logging system, and then we were connecting it to the car also to give you some RPM and speed. Speed is coming from the GPS, but RPM and some other stuff. I don't remember exactly what we had and what he produced in the video, but we had some things on it. And they also got the highway patrol with the Straker radars to shoot me during the runs. So they were shooting, I think, 3 times during the run, on each run, with their high-speed camera.
And then you verify the correlation between all those systems. To see that they're not too much off.
Yeah, exactly. And then we had our own system. We had 1 GPS in the car, and then we had our own data logging system from AIM that have its own GPS system. So at the end of the day, we're having 3 different GPS system in the car, plus the radar system from the highway patrol.
3 different from 3 different manufacturers, and 2 were from Race Logic, so like total were like 4.
Yeah, exactly. So Race Logic had 2.
So you had 4 independent plus like people from outside. So that's the way. To make sure that they all correlate and that there is no question asked.
And that was the thing also. We didn't want to have any kind of questions after it. And by doing this, it takes a lot of time and it costs a lot of money. And you want to avoid. You want to avoid any kind of talk about it, and you need to have it to produce a good video about it and truth about the whole experience.
Yeah, exactly. Good. Well, I guess that clears it up for me. And also for the other people when it comes to because there were lots of questions, especially like, okay, do you go only once or do you have to do it twice? And regarding also the authorities and the measuring equipment. So let's go towards go to the actual happening of the record. So you did all the preparation work in Sweden. You board the plane. So when did you arrive?
On the 3rd of November, actually.
So the day before?
Yeah, the day before. Yeah.
So there was like no recon or...
No.
Well, you did go probably by car just like to see that.
I think we landed actually on the 2nd of January at the evening. So we went straight to the hotel in Las Vegas where we were staying that night. And on the 3rd we drove out to Paramp, and that was the first time that we saw the car again after 2 weeks, more or less.
Did you do the recon of the track, of the surface?
Yeah, when we were driving there, we were driving to Paramp, and I just was so amazed when we come around the corner and I could see the long straight. Yeah,
something that you only see in the movies.
Yeah, exactly, in all the American movies.
Yeah.
And we were driving down, it was a small incline, and then I remember we reached the bottom of it more or less, and then it was went up and down, and I said, Jesus, we cannot drive here, because if we are driving here at 400 km an hour, we will take off.
Yeah, same what happened here at Nürburgring with Flugplatz, car taking off, Mercedes in Le Mans.
Exactly. You get air underneath the car. It's very dangerous.
Okay.
So I was very, very scared.
That was another issue that you couldn't calculate without knowing the track.
Of course, we had got a map of the track, but I couldn't see any bump in that map we got from them. So I was a bit scared about it. So I immediately started to find the people that was organizing in this. And
why didn't you tell me so?
What the fuck is a big jump in the middle of the road?
We also brought Michael Bay on set.
Yeah, it's not a contest of flying highest here. But he said, no, we are not driving in that direction. Oh, okay. But is there not the same elevation heights and so on the other side? No, it's not that big. Okay, but jump in the car and I will take you out there and you will see for yourself. So we went out there and it was more or less nothing. So that was a big relief for me.
So the other side of the highway?
The other side of the highway was a little bit higher, so it was more or less flatter than the bottom of the other one, because that was a pretty big jump there. So
then you got to the car? Everything went well?
Transport? Most of it. When we started driving it a bit, we were seeing some strange behaviors on the car. It was... The idling was starting to be a bit rough and grumpy, and we were trying to figure out what it was and so on. At the end, we could see that the fuel pressure was going up and down. But that happened more or less in the evening, because we were waiting on the fuel truck to arrive. So on the evening there, we started up the car with the new fuel in the car. And the idle was just all over the place. It was just up and down and up and down. And the fuel pressure was following it. So we were looking at and trying to run the fuel pumps individually, one by one. And there was one pump that was more or less not working.
Okay.
And I pull out all the logging from the car we had it in Sweden until it arrived. And it was more or less 15 startups during that time, driving it into the airport and driving it off. And the important thing is here also that you're not allowed to have any kind of fuel more or less than more than transport. Like 5 liters or something, as little as possible, they say. So the car was running on idle, and we could see that they were driving it up on the aircraft and so on. And it was staying on idle for a very, very long time. And also when they took the car off the aircraft, they were staying on idle for a long time.
Yeah.
And then we could see.
So fuel pump probably went dry.
Yeah, probably. And we could see that they were trying to start up the car like 6 or 7 times, and it was just coughing, and then died. So they were probably having ignition on and off like 15 times, and that in the end of the day, for some reason, probably burned one of the fuel pumps. Because normally if you see that you have no fuel, you fill it up and try driving again, not trying to start it 10 times. So
that was it's not something you would go to the nearest Koenigsegg dealer in Nevada and get that.
No, not the evening before. So that was a big issue, and especially when we were driving on E85, we needed a lot of fuel. But we are using more or less. There's 2 fuel pumps in each side of the car, so we are having 4 fuel pumps. So 2 of them is more or less running when you are in low load, and the other 2 is running more when you're in high load in boost mode. So you're having the 4 of them. So we didn't really know how much it could deliver, but of course when it was delivered, it's always can produce more than we need. But losing 25% is quite a lot.
Yeah, of course.
So we really didn't know when we went to bed. We were working until like 1 o'clock in the evening or something to really figure it out and trying to see if we could take it out or so. But the problem was that we were filling up the car fully because we didn't know this. And there was like 70 liters of ethanol in the car. And how should we drain this? We don't have so much tools and all of that. So
what was the solution?
The solution was that we don't have a pump, so it doesn't matter if we take it out. We will not be able to fix it anyway. So we were hoping that it was enough with 3 pumps. And we were calling some guys at the factory also, and they said that it's going to be close. We have never done that, but it should be able to maybe do it with 3 pumps. But you need really to be careful and test it. And also we did that in the morning. I went out on the track there at Spring Mountain Racing Resort, and we did a couple of laps there, and I had full throttle on the straight to just go through the whole rev range to see that we had enough fuel pressure on the high RPMs. And I came back and we looked at the logs and everything, and everything was okay. It was stable. And we could see that we were using like 95% or something on the duty cycle of everything. So it was straight on the edge there.
Yeah, was the altitude, like the height, were you based also influential of that? How was the air?
I think that might have been one of the saviors because the boost pressure was dropping down around 0.15 bars or something, down to 1.4, 1.45 bars of boost. Normally we were running 1.6 bars, but because of the high altitude it's thinner and so on, and we were driving everything otherwise as stock. So that actually probably made it so we didn't need that extra percentage of fuel that we would have needed otherwise probably. But also at the same time it gave us a little bit less horsepower in the engine, and it should be correlating to around 100 to 200 horsepower. So but luckily we were at 1,000 meter of altitude, so at that point the air is a lot thinner, so it produces less drag. It's easier to punch through. So more or less the loss of horsepower was equal to the drag.
To the drag. So
of the air.
Yeah, so whenever people say like, "Oh, my car is not fast because of the high altitude," it's you just don't have a good car.
You don't know about the density of the air.
That's another important thing to take into consideration. So didn't go as smooth as planned, but eventually you So you can even say eventually, since we know that you did the record by now, maybe it could have gone even, well, maybe faster, well, probably, but...
Yeah, but...
not because of that.
Yes and no. The average would be probably faster, yeah.
Yeah?
But not the top speed would not be that much faster because we were hitting the rev limiter more or less on the 7th gear.
Okay. Shows again also how reliable Koenigsegg is in terms of there's enough backup, so to say, in case one fuel pump fails, exactly. You have another one. Yeah. Okay, so you arrive there, the car is ready, or at least you're certain that it will hopefully last. Yeah. And what happens next? What time did you start?
Yeah, we started quite early in the morning because, as I said, we were up and working until 1 to try to figure this problem out and trying to see what we could do and so on. So it wasn't much of a rest that night, I would say. I was quite tired in the morning, but still that turned around quite fast with all the adrenaline that was running. Yeah. So I think we went up at like 5 or something in the morning. Okay. Because at 6 we were going out to drive on the track there to check everything. We had a briefing the night before with everything, and we was briefing on where we should put up the marks and where we should do the record, and the customer actually was very, very keen on having this average on the flying mile and flying kilometer, because that was an old record from Mercedes-Benz from the 1938. Okay. Wow. It was an old record, and also fastest speed on a public highway. Okay. So these were the 3 records that the customer wanted to break, because have stood for almost 80 years. Yeah. And that is just a true testament for what Mercedes did back 1938. It's just astonishing, really, to drive 435 kilometers or whatever they did
on the old bicycle tires and whatever they were doing. But
it was absolutely ridiculous.
And at some point, people started to realize, it's actually crazy. People are dying, and eventually that's why they stopped as well.
And that was what happened, because I mean it was Rolfo Corchiola that drove the Mercedes, and did a record on the morning, and on the afternoon the Audi and what was
Auto Union.
Auto Union, was doing it with Bernd Mailänder or something like that, and he crashed and died that day. Very tragic, and more or less they stopped this pursuit of the high speeds after that, and I can really understand it also, because it was almost 440 kilometers an hour, and I mean the tire technology and everything they had back then, it was just absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, it was non-existent. But at the end of the day, if you look at it, there was not a serious production car.
That's true.
It had no coolers. It was a crazy bodywork just produced for speed, and it couldn't more or less not turn. Exactly. It was just a speed wagon. Yeah.
Well, that's something we can maybe say for our part 3 of this series. So you arrived there, pumped on adrenaline. You went through all the briefings. What kind of briefing are there? Because I know from races, like, okay, yellow flag is this, red flag is that. What did it tell you?
No, we more or less went through what's going to happen during that day. We had one guy that was driving a truck that would sweep the whole 11 kilometers of road from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. in the morning. So we were supposed to start around 8 when he was finished with going back and forth. And we were a bit anxious also about the wind, because the day before that was blowing really, really hard. And we were quite lucky that the day we did a record, it was calming down in the morning. And we went through the profile of the track to put out the markers where we should do the flying mile, flying kilometers, and so on. And update all the guys that was there, from the fire marshals to with the fire trucks and ambulance drivers and all of the other organizers, and we had 2 helicopters with TV or movie equipment on, and we had one or 2 drone drivers. So more or less corresponding on what's going to happen, what times, and so on. And we had actually been able to close down the road for 2 days.
Okay. So you had a backup plan.
Yeah, we had a lot of time. If something would have happened with the weather or whatever. But we set out in the morning, and we could see that it was not that much of a wind. It was a quite heavy breeze, but it was blowing more or less in the line of the road. So either we had tailwind or headwind, because as soon as it's moving to the side wind, it starts being very, very dangerous. We can cope with some headwind, and tailwind is just only a benefit, more or less. It doesn't do anything, more or less. But a headwind is quite disturbing also, because it's a lot of things is happening, and especially when it's a bit fluctuating. But I mean, also it was in the desert, more or less. But I luckily picked up that it was a small fence around the road. So, but of course, jackrabbits or whatever can jump in.
Oh yeah, all the wild.
And but there is not so much wildlife in the desert, not big ones at least. But yeah, you can have tumbleweeds or whatever. But yeah, nothing really to think about. It's just things that can happen, and something that you cannot think about.
Yeah, exactly. So, but as mentioned, going back to the safety marshals that you said they were present, and things that might happen. I did a safety marshal training. I have my marshal license, and every safety marshal out there knows what happens. Like if a race car does something, how to extinguish it. These people, I don't think they do top speed record every day.
No.
And then they know what happens when a Koenigsegg goes with 400.
Yeah.
Then you'll end up on your roof.
Yeah.
So were there any like special briefing regarding that, or concerns from their side, or what was?
Yeah, it was more or less when we were arriving to the location where we had our base on the road, and there was actually a fun part of it also. We were debating on if we should take the car on a tow truck out to the track or not. And I said, no, why should we do that? It's a street legal car, and actually
that's the purpose of it.
I told the owner, no, we should drive it out. So jump in the car, and we drove it out to the place where we started, and I actually drove the customer up and down the highway when we were doing like 350 kilometers an hour, and that was the first runs on that road. So and then when we did one more test run with my software engineer at that time, and actually we hit 400 kilometers at that run when we looked at the data logging afterwards, and everything looked good. So then the preparation started with everything, and we had highway patrols and the organization where we can call them and say that stop the traffic. So there were no traffic on the other side of the road, and they stopped it after like 10 minutes until all the cars has passed, and then we could go. But before that, all of that record trying attempts, I needed to go through with all the marshals there, the fire marshals and the ambulance drivers and so on, what would happen if certain things happened and did go wrong. And it was kind of a crazy thing, but I just needed to steel myself really to just speak of something that can happen, and nothing
but it's weird, like talking
nothing that would go into me, and I more or less said that if there is a fire, take it out. I can survive maybe 10 to 30 seconds in a fire, but even if I'm upside down, but if you just take the fire out, I can probably get out. So, but at the end of the day, I know that also if you go on the side of the road in 450 kilometers an hour, it's probably not going to end well.
No.
But I mean, that is the same thing as a mentality of a racing driver. You can never think about that, because as soon as you start thinking about that, either you're losing time or something happens. So you need to be 100% focused on what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, apart from this, let's move away from this emotional part and go to the actual record run. So you said you did some rounds with the customer, with your software engineer, and then it was time to hit the track, I guess.
Yeah.
So what happened?
So we were discussing a little bit what we should do, if we should drive in one direction or the other. And I said that, but we start from the top and drive downhill and with the tailwind. And if we are not close to the speeds we want to achieve, then it makes no sense to drive up the hill. Yeah. But from our calculations, it shouldn't be more than like 10 kilometers of difference going up and down the hill, because an incline of that is not doing that much. It's a little bit, but not much. But with the wind, it's even more. So we started from that side. So I just did the first run, and I mean, I had more or less the full trust of Christian to do more or less what I wanted to do, because I was driving it and I was the one that had prepared everything and done everything. So he said that we should maybe try to do it slow, to do it
gradually build up. We have 2 days.
Yeah, we have 2 days and so on and so on. But what we haven't mentioned here is that we had a lot of spectators, and it was the same day as SEMA Auto Show. And this was a big task also, to keep this a secret. Yeah. So otherwise we could have seen like 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 people coming there. Yeah. But we luckily kept it a secret. But there was a lot of invited guests. A lot of customers were there. Yeah. A lot of YouTubers were there. So we had they needed to put out fence where the people was staying, that we didn't want to have in the heart. But I mean, there was like 8 to 10 customers there with their own cars, also 4 or 5 of them with the Agera RSs, and it was a family more or less. And from the factory, it was Christian, his son, me, one of my friend, the technician, and the software guy called Andre, and the mechanic. So we were a small team.
Wasn't Steven there as well?
Yeah. Sorry, Steven, the PR guy, of course. He was writing everything. So doing the first run, I was just more or less feeling what the car should do and what's gonna happen. So I cruised up to 300 kilometers an hour, and then I started stepping on it, and more or less feeling, and I mean, it picked up speed so fast. I remember looking down, and I was already at 420 and at 430, and everything just felt good. It was like cruising. Yeah. And then I lifted off the throttle, maybe about 50-60% or something. Nearly 440 kilometers an hour. Yeah. And I felt the car was diving down a bit, but not so scary or anything. Then came back, and I said to Christian, I think you already got the record. And he said, what, are you kidding me? Yeah, well, it felt good, and I think we hit almost 440 or something. Yeah. And Julian, the guy from Race Logic, he looked at it, the data, and relieved that it was 436 kilometers an hour. Yeah. And that was 1 kilometer faster than the record. Yeah. So we broke the record on the first attempt.
Which wasn't even an attempt.
Yeah.
It was just
exactly. It was the first test. It was the first test. But then I was going through the data logging, and I could see that it was diving down quite a lot when I released the throttle. I think I had around 1 G or something by just
deceleration by lifting.
Yeah, just by lifting the throttle.
Crazy.
In that speed.
Wow.
And that is like slamming the brakes on a normal car at 100 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, on a sports car even.
Yeah.
What we talked about first. Yeah.
Going like this, and I talked to Eric, the managing director of Michelin, that was there, and and I was calculating how much load we put into the tire at that point, and he said, yeah, maybe
don't lift.
We need to do that a little bit more careful.
Yeah.
So but then I could see also on the dampers that we were starting to push down the car over 400 km/h. So I bled off some aero in the front, because we can change the aero by 2 flaps in the front underneath the splitter. So I could bleed off some downforce, and then we did go for the second run. And we also didn't have the benefit of having a low fuel in the car, because we were quite scared of it sucking dry also. So we were having like half a tank, because we needed to know that we had fuel pressure. And that adds weight and so on.
Of course.
And then we did the second run, and more or less I was just cruising like 40-50% throttle up to 300 km/h, and then just gradually started to push down. And then at, I think it was 350 km/h or something, I had full throttle. And then short there after I shift to 7th gear, and then was flat out. And after I could see that more or less after 2 kilometers I was hitting 400 km/h, and it took us about 1 kilometer to reach 40 km/h. Then it took 1 kilometer more from 440 to 450, and it took 1 kilometer more from 450 to 457, where the top speed was. So I mean, the distance adds up pretty fast. And I had full throttle for, I think it was a bit more than around 20 seconds or something.
And that's how fast you cover that distance.
Already. And we were covering, from I started until we reached like 400, we were covering 4 kilometers in 20 seconds. More or less.
Wow. So is there any other reason why you went like so cruising like 40% of throttle and then flat out?
Yes and no. I mean, at the end of the day, we were aiming for a high speed and not an acceleration. I mean, if you're having full throttle from the beginning, you're building heat into the engine and everything. So it was more or less a precaution to know that we had a little bit less stress on the engine arriving there when we needed it.
But basically, long story short, you were already in the rev limiter on the highest gear, so there was not much more to gain out of it.
I had a display where I had put up some shifting lamps. And when the last red lamp was blinking, then I know that we were very, very close, within 50 to 100 RPM from the rev limiter only. So I know that when I saw that start lighting up sometimes, and then it was starting to be more regular, and when it's lighting up, we're almost in the rev limiter. And you also have a soft cut limit, like 100 RPM before the real hard cut. So it was going into the soft cut at 457 km/h ish. And I just could see that one blinking more and more and more and more. And I said, it will not be anymore. And I mean, I've already spent like 5 seconds going from 450 to 457. I mean, there's not more that I can do. And maybe we can do 1 or 2 kilometers more, or maybe 460 and going into some kind of hard cut on the engine. And I really didn't want to do that either in that speed. So that's why I backed off just before I could see that, this is it.
And then you had to immediately run the
then of course it was a big sharing when I arrived to the service point where we had, and then the focus just switched immediately. That Christian, I can remember Christian saying to me, but now we need to do it in the other direction within an hour, because that is also a regulation from the FIA that you need to do this within an hour. So you cannot do it one day and doing it a week after, when the wind have changed.
Of course,
but actually the wind was picking up more and more. So when we run the other direction up the hill, it was even more wind than we were doing downhill. And also it was starting to turn a little bit on the side, so maybe a 5-10 degree angle against me. And well, we said that better get going as soon as possible, and I think it was like 45 minutes after or something when we had cooled down the engine and so on a bit in the car and the tires and everything. And a bit speaking about the tires also here, we could see that it was not building any temperature. We were only doing like 50-60 degrees of temperature doing these speeds, and also when we were traveling over 400 kilometers an hour, we could see that it was decreasing in temperature because of the wind.
Okay, so there was so much wind that it cooled down the tire actually.
And we didn't put enough energy into the tires. And also when we did the setup work and everything, I set up the car so we didn't have more or less any kind of downforce all the way up to 400 kilometers an hour. And after that we were starting to add downforce for the stability of the car. Because as I said, we were going up to 400 and it felt good. So after that we didn't know, and that's why the aerodynamics of the car started to push the car down. Of course we were trying to bleed off, but the car is how it is, and it's just adding more and more downforce the faster you go. And that is the case with all cars more or less, especially hypercars. If it's not completely wrongly designed, then it can add more and more lift. So on the sensor parts, I had sensors on all 4 wheels that was having an IR sensor that was sensing 16 points on the wheels, both front and rear, and we could see exactly what happened on the wheel, the temperature, and we could have the pressure inside the tire and so on, and we could see that the pressure was just slightly going up, not even close where the limit was. And the temperature was not going over like 60 degrees. And I spoke to Eric, the guy from Michelin, and he was just astonished. It's just, what? It's not true. And we were looking at the tires, and the mold of the tire was still there.
Okay.
It was not even starting to wear down anything. You can still see the lines of the tire when it comes out of the mold when they are manufacturing the tires. So the car is very, very easy on the tires. And so we said immediately we go on the other direction. So we set out and I cruised up, but I know that we set the marks a bit later on the track, a bit earlier from that side, so to say. So I need to pick up the speed a little bit faster. So I more or less run the engine and everything a little bit harder from the beginning, but it was too soon because I hit this top speed very, very fast. And when I was going against the wind, I was doing 435 kilometers an hour and it's going up and down a couple of kilometers. And then we were driving into the wind and I could feel the wind is moving the car like a meter to the sides.
Without doing anything from
without doing anything. Just having straight forward and just moving the car, and then you just need to turn the wheel like 1 degree, just trying to keep it into the center. And at the end of the day, it was only a two-lane highway, and with a very, very margin of tarmac aside of these lines. And then it was the gravel and the desert. So moving completely to the other lane and then back again to the center, and I was doing top speed for over 30 seconds at 435 kilometers an hour because I know the marks that I needed to hit. And I was just sitting there and waiting. What the fuck? It's never coming. And I was just doing the full speed all the time. And I actually remember one time I was sitting there and starting to be a bit bored, and I was looking at
just casually doing 430 something.
All the telemetry that I could see of the engine and temperatures and so on. yeah, and everything looked good. And I just remember I need to look out the side to see what it is. Yeah. And I just looked out the side and I could just see a ray of light. And I quickly turned my head to the front again. Yeah. And that was quite scary to see. And it felt like a science fiction movie when you see the ray of light when you're in Star Wars or something, and you see the stars just flashing by you. Yeah. It was kind of a similar thing. It was a bit scary and crazy, but yeah, it was a good memory to have. Yeah. So yeah, and then I was quite relieved when I hit that sign and could let the throttle go. Mm-hmm. And I know that I have been driving for 435 kilometers an hour for 30 seconds. Yeah. And yeah, that was more or less it. When I arrived back, everybody was just sharing, and it was a very good time. And I remember that it took my breath away a little bit, and I just went out of the crowd because they let all the people in, and it was 50 people there standing around the car, and I didn't want to be in the middle. I wanted to leave it to the owner of the car and Christian and so on. So I went out of the circle with my buddy and mechanic. We were talking there for a little bit, and then they were announcing the average speed and so on, and everybody was happy. Mm-hmm. But then we started to switch on again, because now it was the 0 to 400 to 0 record that we wanted to beat again. We wanted to do it officially this time. So came on again, and then jumped in, and then I went for it. And I was actually having two displays, one the official Race Logic one that was showing miles per hour, and I had the speedometer. And from regulations, you're not allowed to show speed on the speedometer less than the actual GPS or the actual speed of the car. So we always have that couple of 3 kilometers faster than you're actually going. Mm-hmm. And with everything that was happening and so on, I forgot about that, and I braked the car immediately when I saw 400 on the display. So I was happy and went back, and they said, but you were only doing 398. So I needed to go again. So now I looked at that GPS, and I braked just a fraction later when I saw 400 on that one.
But it was in miles, you said?
Yeah, and miles, 250-ish. Yeah. No, actually, we changed it from miles per hour to kilometer an hour.
So you would be able to see it? Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we did that record, and just for a contest, from 400 kilometers an hour until I was braking down below 400 kilometers an hour, that was 6/10.
Of a second.
Yeah. 0.6 seconds. Yeah. So that was the time that I was over 400 kilometers an hour. Before I hit the brakes. Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah.
But we were traveling up to 401.7 kilometers an hour before braking. Yeah. So sometimes when you're doing that kind of record, you can go up to like 450 kilometers an hour braking. Then you have full braking.
Yeah, and then power. It starts measuring from the 400 to the.
Yeah, and then it's also for me a little bit of cheating, but that is nothing that you can do so in the regulations, because you're only measuring the braking distance and the acceleration distance. But as a racer, you want to have the whole sequence of going up and going down. For me, is more legit. But of course, they cut out that 0.6 seconds, so it's 33 something seconds.
Significantly very fast.
Yeah, compared to the Bugatti, it was 42 or something. So it was about 9 seconds faster. So it was a pretty big margin.
Everyone was happy.
Yeah.
Big celebration.
Yeah.
So what was your winner's dinner?
We actually went into Las Vegas and had a big steak, but that was a big steak, and I was so full after that one. But we had one bottle of champagne and so on. It was just very calm and quiet because we were quite pumped with the adrenaline, and actually for me it was just a big stone lifting off the shoulder and a huge relief, more than being happy in that way, because I put my life into this for a month and just worked flat out with it, and when everything went as good as it did, you get just zombie state, more or less.
Of course. Yeah.
So it was just a big relief.
Where would Koenigsegg want to cheat to go even faster? And by this, we're referring to that you went out there with a production spec car. This means you had the option to remove the mirrors.
Yeah.
You had the option to remove the spoiler maybe, or put a different angle of attack. Yeah. What could you have done? And again, you didn't do them because you wanted to maintain the state of a production spec vehicle.
Yeah.
But what could you have done? How much would it have influenced the run? And what could we potentially see from the car?
Yeah, I think we could have seen quite a lot of increase in speed. I mean, by removing the wing mirrors, tape off the louvers in the front and in the rear, and taping off all the gaps around the car, changing the diffuser in the rear to an old CCR or CCX model, we would reduce drag, and maybe even removing the rear wing. But that would keep, I don't know about that one, but
question.
Yeah, that's a stability, but it was contributing
to the drag, of course.
Drag. And then you get to the mechanical parts. Of course.
How much would the production?
I think it was around 10 to 15 kilometers an hour.
Wow, already on that alone.
Yeah, on just the drag.
So you did 257, so that would be already going to 270.
Yeah, almost.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, and then that's only the aerodynamics part, which is of course at these high speeds.
Yeah.
Is probably the biggest factor.
Yeah, that would be about 292 miles per hour or something. Only with that small tweak. But at the end of the day, it would not be possible because we were hitting the rev limiter anyway. So
yes.
But if we could have gone ballistic with the car and everything, we could have raised the boost pressure to make more horsepower of the engine, and we could have changed the gear ratio of the car. So we would have been in a better RPM range of the engine and so on. So I would say that it would have been possible to hit 300 miles per hour with the car,
Yeah. Which are actually pretty easy mods, to speaking of. Take up stuff, put different gearbox, and
it's just changing, more or less changing the rear differential.
Not even the gearbox, the final drive.
Yeah, just the final drive.
And then you're done. You're set to go.
Yeah.
So that would have been an option.
Yeah, maybe raise the boost pressure by 0.2 or something like that to gain a couple of hundred more horsepower. Yeah, the most memorable thing that I also take with me from that experience was when Christian said, that was easy. And that was the true testimony that you have done something good. Because these things are never easy.
Yeah, exactly.
And if
because
everything goes as planned and everything goes easy, then you have done the job great.
Very good preparation. Like from your side, preparation, the engineers, the who built the car, the whole team, everyone. That it takes, as mentioned, that's why mostly manufacturers take years before they come and do some records, because they want to be absolutely precise that when they go, it actually happens. And that's in the end of the day then testimony for the whole product, the car, the brand, and everything. And I think that was set in stone back then, and it was a great job.
And also for me, I mean, I was thinking a lot of this before, and I was also thinking about all the promotion around it. And for me, if I would see someone doing this, I would see would you rather see the car going up and down the straight for like 20 times until they break the record, or do you want to see them just go there, drive one time and beat the record? I mean, the most hype thing is to just go there, balls out, and smash the record, and then you go home. And we did 3 runs. Where 2 was one was a test run, and 2 was the record runs. And also at the end of the day, I mean, the more time you spend in these speeds, the closer you get
to breakdown of a car.
Yes, or something will happen. And just eliminating the risks of everything. I mean, it's get a higher risk doing so immediately, but the risk consideration of doing that 20 times is higher than doing it 1 time.
True.
So that was my also target, and also, I mean, it was a public event more or less, and I mean, there was a lot of people seeing this, and at the end of the day, for me, it's so much cooler just to go there, poof, bang, we're done. We were done in 2 hours.
Go eat steak.
Yeah. And actually, some of the YouTubers didn't even arrive.
Oh, really?
Because they thought that they were coming after lunch because they were doing some preparations before. So they missed the whole thing. And actually, it was quite funny. Also, after we did all of this and everybody was packing up and going to the track again, me and the mechanic and the engineer were standing there looking at everything and just taking everything in and waiting for our ride back. Because the owner took the car and drove it back.
I would do the same. Well, that's it. And now I have my car.
So we were standing there, and this was literally like 30 minutes, 40 minutes after we did the 0 to 400 to 0. I could see there was building up tornadoes, or not tornadoes, but tromps on the track, blowing in sand and so on the track. And the speed of the wind was picking up significantly, and about a minute later it came a big gust of wind over us with sand. So we were covered in sand after it. So the timing was perfect. And we were pretty lucky with everything of that, and the end of the day or the afternoon the wind picked up again, and it was more or less impossible to drive then. So we had that gap with these 2-3 hours, and if we have started slow, we would never have got the record.
Maybe not possible.
Maybe the next day, but
exactly. All the ifs and buts. At the end,
exactly.
The only thing that matters is the result, and that, the way it was achieved, it was magnificent. So. I'm very proud of you. Thank you very much for sharing this story with us. I think we covered pretty much everything, whether it's to cover about the record itself.
And a big congratulations to Koenigsegg for achieving this. And I mean, all of the guys at the factory just have a tribute to all of these records and so on. I mean, every single guy and woman in the company is just working flat out all the time to keep pushing the boundaries all the time. And it was actually, I was a little bit sad because I couldn't be there when they announced it in the factory, but I got a video from them, and they were gathering all the people inside of the prototype area, and they showed everything, and Christian was telling a bit of it and so on, and it was a nice moment. For sure. Cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for sharing this story with us and explaining all the questions when it comes to what makes a record and how it's being done. And sometimes it's harder than it seems. It is mostly harder than it seems, but sometimes with enough preparation, it can be pretty easy. That was easy.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, there's very few people that knows what happens beyond 400 kilometers an hour. It's quite hard even for me, sitting here like 3 years after and explaining how it feels and everything. And I got that question like 1,000 times, and I can't answer it because it's
maybe that's something for our part 3. So so thank you very much for watching for another very lengthy video. But as mentioned, I just wanted to have it everything because this is a once in a lifetime story, and hopefully if YouTube is going to be there in 50 years, it will be used for an archive documentary on how it was back then. So thank you very much for watching. Tune in for the third episode where we're going to talk more about the off-topic stuff, and especially the question, why did you decide to do it? Why did you agree it from your side? Because again, it might be very easy, and like many of you guys are going to say like, oh, if I will be asked the question to drive 400 or doing top speed with Koenigsegg, I will do it. But actually professionals have to think it twice about it.
Yeah.
Or 3 times. Or 4 times.
Well, I mean, most of the race car drivers have crashed once or twice in their careers, and we know.
Per year.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
And we know what happens, and
Exactly.
and we know the speed. And I mean, a racing car normally never exceed 300 km/h. Doesn't matter what type of racing car you're in. Yeah, Formula 1 can reach 350, but I mean, normally they're never going more than 300, and most of the cars is not even pursuing 250.
Yeah.
To be doubling that speed.
Exactly.
It's
so
something completely different.
We're going to talk about that and much more, also answering some of your questions that didn't make it in the first 2 videos because they were like more off topic, but we included everything hopefully from all the questions that you had in these first 2 parts, first and second part. So thank you very much for watching, and see you in part 3. Bye bye.
Bye bye.